Welcome to Demand Solutions, showcasing Latin American and Caribbean innovation and entrepreneurship that improves lives. Thank you all for being here this morning. We will have a day full of inspiration, listening to innovators, entrepreneurs, policy makers, and ecosystem builders working in Latin America and the Caribbean, sharing their stories, challenges, and accomplishments. We would like to thank the Global Entrepreneurship Summit organizers for putting together the event, which we're honored to kick off with this Demand Solutions. To begin our day, please help me welcome Luis Alberto Moreno, President of the Inter-American Development Bank.
Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I'd like to first and foremost acknowledge dear friend Laura Tyson and friends and members of the press, all of you who came out here today. This is not a typical IDB event. This doesn't look like a typical development bank kind of thing, but I think it's central to the future of what we do. And if you're here today, it is safe to assume that you're, one, interested in Latin America, in innovation, and certainly in development, and hopefully most of you will check all these three boxes. Now, the first two require a little explanation on my part. One of my duties as president of the Inter-American Development Bank is to talk up our region, and the region I represent, which is Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, you all know that these days, the news coming out of Latin America don't make my job any easier. Two of our biggest countries, Brazil and Venezuela, are going through what's arguably perhaps their worst both political and economic crisis in decades. Their recessions are helping drag the region's average growth rate to negative territory for the second year in a row. In fact, it'll probably be our worst performance since 1982, when at the time, the foreign debt crisis exploded, and as Laura knows well, it did a lot of damage to Latin American economies. As if that weren't enough, hardly a day goes by without a massive protest against corruption, against crime, or just plain old government incompetence. So by now, you're probably thinking that's a pretty strange way to start a pitch, the way you do around Silicon Valley. But I'm telling you this because I truly believe that this is no ordinary crisis. I really believe that Latin America is in a historic turning point. Professor Francis Fukuyama, who many of you have probably heard about, once noted that it took the United States more than a century after its founding to start cleansing its own government. And many of you might remember that great president, which was Teddy Roosevelt, when he went against the trusts and began a process that helped build the foundations of the kinds of institutions that the United States has today. Well, we in Latin America kind of take longer to do these things. But things are changing. For example, we used to be known for being pretty laid back about corruption. In fact, Brazilians even had a saying for it that says, "Rouba mas faz," which means he steals, but he gets things done. No one in Brazil is saying that today anymore, or for that matter, anywhere around Latin America. People are standing up to corruption. Usually, this is happening because we have the emergence of a new Latin American citizen that is more connected, that is better educated, and in a way is digitally wired into our growing middle class. Judges are prosecuting powerful people. Presidents and CEOs are facing jail time. A generation ago, scandals such as the ones rocking some of our countries would have probably sparked coups d'etat. This time around, our democratic institutions are finally working the way they're supposed to work, with functioning checks and balances. In essence, the emergence of a growing and stronger democracies. That is why I believe Latin America and the Caribbean are at this historic juncture. Now, this brings me to the second point that I want to clarify, and that's about development. By development, I mean the transformation of countries, the process of rising from poverty and backwardness to reach prosperity and modernity. Development in general, and development banking in particular, is what we do at the IDB. And it's a very old service industry. The World Bank, for example, the oldest development bank, was founded near the end of World War II, when Hewlett and Packard were still working in the garage here in Palo Alto. Now, in typical public sector fashion, development banks long felt they were insulated from the impacts of technological change. Disruption was something that happened to others. But lately, the notion is being turned around on its head. Take the case of conditional cash transfers. Here I'm talking about the subsidies that some governments provide, in fact, most governments provide throughout Latin America, to poor families as an incentive to keep their kids in school and to equally give them shots and vaccinations. Those subsidies are effective but relatively complex to operate and run. Not every government has the chops to get them right. Nevertheless, we've promoted them for more than a decade, lending billions of dollars to countries from Mexico to Argentina. And I bet you know what happened next. A bunch of graduate students in Boston figured out a way to provide subsidies to the poor in simpler and in cheaper ways. The name of their startup is called Give Directly. Pretty much says it all. First of all, they found that the proliferation of cell phones and the spread of mobile banking in Africa made it easy to transfer small sums of money to lots of poor people who had already adopted those technologies. They also found that they could use satellite images to detect houses with thatched roofs, which are a pretty solid indication of an extremely poor household. Give Directly is just one example of how smaller, faster, and unconventional players are disrupting the development industry. Some of our peers might be alarmed by the emergence of such potential challengers. We at the IDB, on the contrary, want to embrace them. We want to meet them, which is why we started holding these events 4 years ago, together with Dick Bloom and the Bloom Center. Because we realized that people were demanding solutions that governments, our biggest clients, weren't providing services quickly enough. Not only do we want to meet them, we want to work with them to help disrupt the public sector as it works today in Latin America and across the Caribbean. Now that brings me to my third point, innovation. Innovation, as you all know, is something we don't do enough across our region. We're lagging in just about every indicator imaginable and every statistic that is written or looked upon. The percentage of GDP devoted to R&D, the ratio of researchers per million inhabitants, or the number of patents registered each year are at the lowest by comparison to other emerging regions. Now, that doesn't mean that there's nothing going on in our neck of the woods. As you'll see throughout the day, we have people with great ideas, and more importantly, with the drive to see them put into action and be successful. But we need many more like them. And that is why we're here, to connect people with ideas and with resources. We want to help build stronger bonds between innovators in Silicon Valley and innovators in our own region who are looking for ways to make our governments work more efficiently and become more responsive to their own citizens. We might not end up with flying cars, but we might succeed in getting more trains running on time, more kids finishing school, more young people finding better jobs, and hopefully more cops preventing crimes before they happen. All of which will be huge steps towards achieving the living standards our citizens so desperately want to reach. So let me finish by recognizing those who've made this edition of Demand Solutions in Silicon Valley possible. I'd like to start by expressing my thanks and heartfelt thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration for enabling us to be part of this Global Entrepreneurship Summit. I equally want to give special thanks to Dick Blum and the Blum Center for Developing Economies. This is our 4th year together that we worked and partnered, and I know that without the validation of leaders such as Dick and Laura Tyson, we wouldn't have come this far in such a short time. I also want to thank the Business Association of the Stanford Entrepreneurial Students. Thanks to their sponsorship, we're holding this event on your campus, and they're exactly the sort of young leaders we like to see building closer ties with peers in Latin America and across the Caribbean. Last, but certainly not least, I'd like to thank all of the innovators that we'll meet today. And I'm sure, I have no doubt, you'll be inspired by their ideas, by their dreams, by their enthusiasm. They remind us that no problem is unsolvable if you work long and hard enough to achieve it. We have a very full day ahead of us, so let's make the best out of it. Thank you all again, and muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, the Blum Center has been IDB's partner for Demand Solutions, as you just said, since 2013. It is my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Laura Tyson, Chair of the Board of Trustees, Blum Center for Developing Economies.
Good morning, everyone. It's a delight to be here. Let me start with the word innovation, and let me remind everyone that the innovation of Demand Solutions, which is an innovation itself, really comes from the leadership and innovative insights of the President Moreno of the American Development Bank, and of Richard Blum, the founder of the Blum Center on Developing Economies. Because from the very beginning, the motivation here is to find a partnership which supports innovation, entrepreneurial solutions to major social and economic challenges throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. And by the way, done well, these solutions have application far beyond the Caribbean and Latin America, because if you actually find solutions that work for major social challenges, they exist all around the world. So I really want to start with recognition of President Moreno's leadership and Richard Blum's leadership. He could not be here today for personal reasons, so I am representing him, and I'm honored to do that. But I really do want to call him out as a major innovator himself. If you look at his very long and distinguished career, he has been arguably one of the founders of the entire private equity industry. Before there was even a word private equity, there was Dick Blum doing private equity. He has been himself a major philanthropist. He started and today continues to flourish the American Himalayan Foundation, with major developmental and innovative activities going on in the American Himalayas, where he himself was a great mountain trekker. So he actually understood the community completely and has been tied to the community, and also has been a very important part of the University of California at Berkeley. So always thinking about how can we support our students? How can we support our faculty? How can we support the institutions on the campus to create solutions to social challenges around the world? So it's a really important vision, which I think motivates demand solutions and the partnership between the Blum Center and the IDB. The partnership goes beyond these kinds of very important events for helping entrepreneurs network with one another, find funders, find other organizations that can pick their ideas up and continue to support them. That's one whole set of things that the partnership between the Blum Center and IDB do. But we also do other things. For example, we've been involved in some very important project evaluations throughout Latin America to try to make sure that as either a business solution comes up or a policy solution comes up, i.e., say, conditional transfers and how to make them work better, we need to be assessing their impact. We need to say, is this working? If not, how do you design or change it so it does work? So impact evaluation has become a very important part of what the international banks do. The World Bank does, the IDB does, the other regional banks do. It's become a very important part of development economics around the world. And we have had a very important partnership between the Blum Center and the IDB supporting project evaluations throughout Latin America. We've also supported some direct research projects, cutting-edge research. For example, a study on the effects of intermittent water supply on water quality and water leakage using very sophisticated sensor network technology. I think the entrepreneur is in the room here someplace. This was put to work in Panama City, but actually the study is relevant throughout Latin America, and frankly, it's relevant throughout the developing world, and it may easily be relevant in the U.S. as well if you're thinking about intermittent water supply. I was listening this morning to what's going on in Nevada. Intermittent water supply on water quality and water leakage with sensor technology. I think this is pretty broadly applicable. This grew out of a research project that the Blum Center has helped support on the Berkeley campus. Now, I want to focus on the Blum Center a little bit more because I actually think it's a very important model for those of you in the room who are interested in or involved with universities in any way. This model is a very, very powerful model for bringing together, I would say, top-level research, top-level scholarship, top-level technology, and practice to solve social challenges. Okay, it's very much driven by the challenges to be solved. It is driven by faculty research looking at those challenges, but there's also the issue of getting the faculty research out of the research lab into projects that are evaluated, into projects that are funded, and basically into projects that are ongoing. That whole process needs to be tended to in an interdisciplinary, ongoing, sustained way. And that is a major, I would say, defining characteristic of the Blum Center. We are trying to do that. We're trying to link cutting-edge technology to social challenges around the world by supporting students and scholars in a network to get this done. The second thing we try to do, of course, is to encourage students, both undergraduates and graduate students, to think about how they can develop their course of studies and therefore their projects to tackle these challenges. So we focus very much on interdisciplinary courses. We have the idea that if you're an undergraduate, you can take a minor in poverty practice and poverty alleviation. If you're a graduate student, you can take another minor. We're calling it, it's a whole new field, development engineering, we're calling it, combining the engineering sort of solution, the technology, how you can make this happen with all of the other things in economics and social sciences and the law, the whole interdisciplinary set of things that need to be brought together if you actually are going to go out and do technology-based solutions that work for development challenges. So there's a very important, I think, lesson for institutions of higher education. It's a great design tool for setting up a process that actually has been very successful. One of the things we do, and in a way it's kind of the same idea as demand solutions, How do you set up business competitions? A lot of the technology solutions that are just developing around the world on social challenges, if you look at the roots of the idea, they frequently come from business competitions. And by the way, the World Bank has been doing some work on this, indicating that business competitions can be very powerful mechanisms for supporting entrepreneurship around the world. So we have something called Big Ideas. We have the opportunity for students across the campus to come up with proposals and year-long support, mentoring, evaluation, course suggestions to take their project, and it's in addition to all the other work they're doing on the campus, take their project and move it along into the competition. And we have had 5,000 students, 18 universities. We've provided support for participants who've gone on to secure $100 million in additional funding so far. It's a relatively new program. So many universities around the world have expressed interest in this that we now have an online toolkit. So if you're sitting in the room here and you're thinking, gee, I'd like to start something at a university I know or I've been associated with, we have a toolkit to help you do it. And I think it's a great organization. Let me say that we've been supported in our efforts recently by a real commitment at the University of California's Office of the President. You know, the University of California is a public institution. We have many campuses. Berkeley's one. We like to think of it as the premier one, but I'm sure there are others from other campuses here who'd like to think of that as theirs as well. We have a very powerful campus system. Sitting at the top of that is Janet Napolitano. She was a major figure in the Obama administration. She has come with a huge amount of energy from Homeland Security to take on the issue of supporting innovation and entrepreneurship throughout the UC system. And I think we have in the room today a new Senior Vice President for Research, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship, Christine Gulbranson. If she's not here, she'll be here later. We are very thankful for UCOP support, but I think what I want to say is it signals the commitment of the entire University of California system to take a list of major social challenges and to find ways to connect faculty and students to interdisciplinary centers like the Blum Center, to other activities on campuses, to get them involved in finding sustainable technology-based solutions to development challenges. So there are a lot of exciting things going on in the UC system, much of them in combination at Berkeley with IDB and with President Moreno. Let me just give you, in closing, a couple of areas where the Blum Center is working in Latin America on specific projects. The Blum Center started at the University of California at Berkeley, but has since spread to 10 campuses. The same general principle, technology, social challenges, sustainability, interdisciplinary, bringing in undergraduates and graduate students, working on planned competitions, working on these kinds of collaborations with the IDB. We recently started a Blum Center at UCLA, and that focuses on poverty and health in Latin America. So working in collaboration with Latin American institutions, the idea is really to focus on social determinants of health, on improving the delivery of health systems to the poorest populations in Latin America. Another new Blum Center is at the UC San Diego campus. The goal of that center is to focus on issues of poverty, immigration, and urban planning on the San Diego-Tijuana border. Clearly a very important issue for California, for the country, for Mexico, for relations between the US and Mexico, common interest in what to do to address those issues. So in conclusion, I just want to say that we feel that there's a lot of amazing things going on, and I will conclude by just indicating a couple of the business ideas, because I think we're now going to move into business solutions that have grown out of the Blum Center working with IDB. So one of them is a social venture called Acopio. It uses information systems to enable farmer-owned cooperatives to better manage data. That data is absolutely essential to when they plant their crops, to how they finance their crops, to when they market their crops, to the whole distribution from every part of the supply chain, From the time the cultivation begins to the time the product is sold at the marketplace, a farmer-owned cooperative with better data can make better decisions and address the income needs and efficiency of their members. Another interesting new one is a novel financial inclusion solutions. Financial inclusion is very important to addressing social challenges in developing countries. This is called the Lotto to Save program. What is the most popular and familiar and frequent transaction for working poor in Haiti? It turns out to be the lottery. That turns out to be true in many countries. It's not just a Haitian phenomenon. So how can you use this use of the lottery to actually create micro savings accounts for people to leverage the existing money mobile platforms, which are being used largely for lotto, to encourage savings? This is really an important area. So you'll hear about more of these kinds of very exciting things today. So I just want to leave you with the notion that I think all of us in this room come together motivated by the desire to use technology, to use it appropriately to address social challenges for the world's neediest population. That is a common thing that brings us together. I think another thing that brings us together is we're global citizens. We're thinking about this. We may be thinking about this in a particular country situation, but actually we're also thinking about the problem common across societies and across the world for these kinds of social challenges. We're thinking about it interdisciplinary. There are probably doctors in this room, there are probably engineers in this room, there are probably economists in this room, lawyers, political scientists. You have to bring all of that together to get the solution right. And we're thinking of it as committed to this goal of helping lift people out of poverty, recognizing it's complicated, it's difficult, but it's deeply worthwhile. Very inspirational. I'm very inspired by the opportunity to speak with you today. So let me, with that, hoping I've inspired you, hoping I've given you some sense of where educational institutions like UC Berkeley can work with major development institutions like IDB to get things done in new ways. And I hope I've inspired you to continue your very important work in the demand solutions field. Thank you very much.